Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Taylor and this is my husband Drew. And on this channel we talk about life and relationships after leaving the church and do some commentary on the goings on in evangelical Christianity. So in today's video we are going to be reacting to the second part of Zelf on the Shelf and Bethany Beal's collaboration. We covered their part one, and in their part one I think that they were more focusing on Bethany and kind of where Girl Defined was headed.
Yeah.
They did talk about her and Dave's relationship, but I felt like it was more focused on Bethany. But in this video, it's titled Navigating a Mixed Faith Marriage. So they're talking more about her and Dave's relationship.
Okay.
And I thought in this video it'd be really cool if we compared and contrasted where their relationship is compared to where our relationship was when we were first deconverting.
Yeah, on the last one, I did notice a few things that really reminded me of us back then. And you've seen this, I have not seen this, so I'm wondering if there's going to be a few more things that I don't know about that you might already think is really similar between us. Yeah,
there actually are a lot of similarities between their relationship and ours. It's kind of scary how similar it is. There are some differences too, but and also I said this in our last video where we covered the part one, but do make sure to check out Zelf's original video. I highly recommend it. I think that, and I said this in the last video, these videos where they're collaborating with Bethany are like one of the most important things that I think is happening in the deconstruction space right now. I just think it's really good that we're talking to people that might see things in a different way than we do and kind of humanizing the other side. I think that's a very important thing.
I think it models productive conversation. I think that Bethany and Dave are modeling productive conversation for people who might be more aligned with Bethany, and then Zelf is modeling a productive conversation for people who are more like aligned with us. So I like to see that.
All right, so we're going to be jumping about 2 minutes in.
Shall we just start throwing questions at you and see where this takes us?
Let's go.
I think the first question everyone probably has is just like, either individually or as a couple, just how's the deconstruction going, or how's the new dynamic of life or marriage or whatever going? Catch us up. How's it been feeling?
Since the big internet moments.
Oh yeah.
I want you to go first.
Really? But it's your
100%.
deconstruction.
Is it? Yeah. Or is it our deconstruction? Go.
Dun, dun, dun.
We'll let the audience decide.
You decide. Tonight, 7 p.m.
So when I first heard this, I was not completely sure if they were kind of joking or referring to a lot of the speculation that there is online over whether or not Bethany is also deconstructing, if they're deconstructing as a couple, or if it's more just Dave's thing, or if they're kind of admitting here that they are deconstructing as a couple. Because from what I've interpreted from things that Bethany has said, I think that she is deconstructing, although she doesn't like to use that term for herself. Which I think is completely fine. I don't think that anybody should be forced to use a label that they don't want to use for themselves. I think that she would see it more as like disentangling or like reevaluating some of her more conservative evangelical views. So like to me it's deconstructing, but I'm not going to tell her she has to say that. But I don't know, what was your take on what they said?
I'm just remembering the bit in one of Paul and Morgan's videos where Bethany talks about how she's not deconstructing and she doesn't like the word and stuff like that. And for me, my take on it now is, in my head, this is represented by deconstructing. Like what deconstructing means for me is what Bethany is kind of going through from what I've seen. But again, I'm like you said, not going to say that she has to use that label. I'm fine with her using whatever label that she wants, as long as she's not misrepresenting what like that label can mean for other people. For some people it does mean completely leaving religion, and for other people it doesn't mean that. And so I really don't see a problem with her not using the word, as long as she's not misrepresenting people.
And I do think that in the past both her and Kristen have misrepresented what deconstruction is, because they've defined it as completely leaving Christianity. And like you said, some people that deconstruct do leave Christianity, like you and I, but there are a lot of people that don't.
Yeah.
And I think that she is, obviously because of what Dave is going through, reframing deconstruction and realizing that that's not what deconstruction means. And so I think maybe in the future she'll be more open to using that term, although, yeah, she doesn't have to.
How it's going? Well, after we made our video, where I admitted where I was at with the deconstruction, namely my doubts about faith, my crisis of faith, blah, 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 blah. Thousands of people have been through similar things. Our relationship it was, I want to say destabilized, but it was kind of in this chaotic mode where we were having a lot of honest conversations, more honest than we've been, more honest than I've been. And so there was a difficulty to that, which I would say fell mostly on Bethany. I would say it's been, in those early weeks, it was more difficult for Bethany. But there was also excitement about sort of putting that out. And so we had a lot of, it was very mixed. We would have difficult conversations where we were expressing to each other how we felt. And we would have exciting conversations or even listening to some of the reactions and kind of seeing like what was happening.
Yeah.
So I kind of feel like here, this is one place where one aspect that I don't relate to Bethany and Dave on, because I feel like when you were first deconverting and we were going through all of that, I wouldn't necessarily say that it was chaotic for us.
No.
There was like the first day, like the day after you told me that you weren't a Christian anymore, that was really difficult for me.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh no, what do I do now? Or where's our marriage headed? Because we were told that you can't be unequally yoked. But I think after that day passed and I realized that our relationship was exactly the same, nothing really had changed other than you didn't believe in God anymore.
Yeah.
I was very hopeful that things were going to be completely fine. So I don't really relate to them here. But I think also because Bethany has made a career on her faith, and that's such a big part of her personality and who she is online, I can see how that would cause a lot of chaos for them, because for her, I'm sure she's like, well, what does this mean?
Yeah.
Not only for our relationship, but for the thousands of people that watch us. What does that mean for them? What are people's opinions and judgments going to be?
Yeah.
So I think it's
a lot more complicated for them than it was for us.
It's a lot more complicated for them. I did want to ask you, because Dave talks about how it's a really exciting time for them.
Yeah.
Was it exciting for you those first few months when you were leaving Christianity? Would you call it exciting?
No. I mean, there were moments of excitement and like wonder and awe.
Mm-hmm.
But no, for the most part, it just kind of felt like work. Felt like constant work. My head was constantly going and going and going, and I had to like solve all these problems in my head and think through things all the time. So it was like having homework just like in your brain all day long. If I was taking a shower, like if I was driving, I couldn't do anything but work on these problems. Mm-hmm. And so that's really the main way that I remember it. It was work punctuated by a couple of moments of, wow, I can finally, like, I can read whatever books I want. I don't mean like smut books. I mean like science books. Like I can read things with an open mind now. This is amazing. Mm-hmm. And that was exciting. But then I also had times of like, wait, I don't know how to construct meaning because I've only been taught one way to do it. Is it possible to construct meaning for yourself and feel fulfilled and everything as someone who doesn't believe in God? I don't know. And so there would be a lot of fear and despair. Mm-hmm. But mostly it was just monotonous work.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Do you think that there was ever a time that was exciting? Like years after when the dust had kind of settled? Yeah,
I think that it was once I realized that you were okay with me being an atheist, mm-hmm. and you like, it would not just that you were okay with it, but that you would stick up for me and say, He's not a different person. You don't need to like persecute him. We're
Yeah.
not unequally yoked. Like, get off his back. And I had also dealt with the meaning and all that kind of stuff, the difficult existential questions. Then things got more fun, more interesting. But I would say that the excitement of deconstruction really had more to do with just building community, like meeting new people, and that
like-minded people.
Yeah, and that mostly happened when you were pretty close to coming out of Christianity anyway.
Yeah.
That was really the most exciting time, because it's just fun to meet new friends. That's about it.
Totally. I would say that there's a lot more excitement for me now. Like in this time that we're in our lives, I feel more excited about it, because I think we've gone through a lot of, like, we've gone through the battle, and like we're on the other side of it. And I think I've really like have more identity, or like I know who I am a lot more now. And I think our relationship was never like super rocky or anything like that, but I think our relationship is very solid now.
Yeah.
And even though I don't identify as an atheist, there was a time where I did. I don't anymore. I have excitement for how I've kind of like developed spirituality that doesn't involve like woo.
Yeah. Or like the supernatural.
Yeah. I'm really excited about that. So
yeah,
I don't know.
I think that I do feel some excitement for myself just in being more pluralistic now. I mean, when I started my channel, I was like, I'm an anti-theist, and I think all religion needs to go extinct. And of course, not by force, but by, intellectual argument and debate. We need to debate religion out of existence. I literally don't believe that's even possible now. I think it's pointless. I don't think like making videos about why you should be an atheist or like the best arguments for atheism really do anything for anybody.
No.
I think that representing like being an atheist as an intellectually valid thing, and as atheists as totally capable of goodness is still very important to me, and I still want to do that. But I find it more exciting to kind of coalition build, like talk to people who have different takes on spirituality and religion and philosophy than me, and find what we can work on together and collaborate on that. That's a lot more fun to me now. The anti-theism stuff felt like waging a war that was really never going to be won.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And that's how I feel, because I see things more pluralistic as well.
Yeah.
And I think that I dipped my toes in the whole atheist sphere and community, and there's a lot of really good people in that community, and a lot of people that I'm still friends with, but I feel more that I'm headed in the right direction, not really attaching myself so much to like the atheist thing.
Yeah.
So since we're talking about marriage and relationships, I thought I'd bring up something that's really enhanced the intimacy between both of us, and that has been introducing sex toys into the relationship.
That's true.
And if you want to get really high quality sex toys, then I can't recommend enough the sponsor of today's video, Womanizer. So I know that we all love a good suction toy, but did you guys know that Womanizer is actually the original inventor of suction toys? They offer a wide range of toys at all different price points, and all of their toys feature their patented pleasure air technology. So let's start with what I like to call the Bentley of vibrators, which is the Womanizer Next. This toy is definitely one of my go-tos because it actually features their improved pleasure air technology, which they've called the Pleasure Air 3D. It has 3 different pulse depth levels and then 14 different intensity levels. So this toy is really versatile for any body type and any mood. One of my favorite features of this toy is that it has a smart silence feature. So the toy is only actually on whenever it's in contact with your skin, which is super helpful if you're trying to be quiet and discreet. It also features an afterglow button that you can press after climax, and it will turn the toy back to its lowest intensity level. But if you're looking for a toy that's a little bit more travel friendly, then I definitely recommend the Liberty 2. Just like the Womanizer Next, this toy features features their patented Pleasure Air technology, but it's a lot more compact, which just makes it perfect for travel. It also features a magnetic travel case, and it has a lock, so you don't have to worry about your toy accidentally vibrating in your suitcase. Both the Womanizer Next and the Liberty 2 are 100% waterproof, so if you want to enjoy these toys in the bath or the shower, that's definitely an option. And here's the best part. If you use my code ANTIBOT20, you'll receive 20% off their entire site. This code even works on sale items, so you can really get some good discounts. Be sure to check out the link in the description box below to save on your next toy. Thank you so much, Womanizer. Now back to the video.
The last time we saw you was just your like reaction to everything related to the Paul and Morgan. And you guys seem like you're in such a beautiful, I mean you still do, but you're in like such a beautiful spot. You had just kind of connected more deeply in this new way.
Yes.
Has it just been like an upward spiral since then?
Upward spiral. Okay, if the spiral's doing this, then yes, it's kind of
It's not
kind of
linear.
like that. Yeah, it's definitely more like waves, and it kind of goes up and up and up. So I would say it's trending upward.
Yeah.
I just kind of want to skip the beginning because whatever's happened in the last month or so has been absolutely phenomenal. I don't exactly know what it is. I would describe it as just magic because I don't really want to know what it is. But I love it. And what it is like our hearts are opening to each other like they never have before, and we're just experiencing love in a way that we never have before. And that is in a lot of ways the beginning of the answer to my deep longing, which has been to get out of my own way and be able to have a relationship and not always be behind like a glass a wall. You know, I could be with the most amazing person in the world, which Bethany is amazing, and not be able to get past my own ego or my own fear. It's really fear. It's fear of being known and fear of, as we've been opening up to each other, and we've both been opening our hearts. It's just like, maybe this is love. Maybe this is what it feels like. And it's been amazing. Mm-hmm. I don't know how that all relates with the whole deconstruction thing. Would it have happened anyway? I do not know. Do I want to know? I don't know.
I think we can all just say the proof is in the pudding. Look at your matchy today.
So matchy, culty matchy.
2020.
We always do that on accident.
I love this so much. When I first saw this, I was like, we literally are always matching, and it's on accident.
Yeah, every time.
So my thoughts are here. It seems like deconstruction for both of them has brought them closer together, which I think that was for sure the case with us. I don't necessarily think that it's because of deconstruction that their relationship is in such a great, amazing place.
Yeah.
I think that it's because they're both willing to work on things together and have honesty and sit down and really try to like work through this together. And so I think that if it could be anything else. It doesn't necessarily have to be like faith deconstruction necessarily. They could be going through anything. And I think that they just have this like posture of wanting to genuinely understand one another, and that's what's bringing them closer together.
Yeah, I mean, speaking from our experience, what I think it is there's a challenge, and it requires them to display a lot of honesty and patience in order to overcome it.
Yeah.
And then they're seeing that both of them are willing to put forward the effort to show that patience and that empathy and honesty. And then they see each other displaying those qualities, and they're like, wow, it makes me love you even more that you'd be willing to do that for our relationship and for me. And
I want to do that for you.
Yeah. I mean, I think that brings a challenge like that either brings out those qualities in people and it shows people like this relationship is really worthwhile, or it creates a lot of stress and it highlights any kind of weaknesses or difficulties that pre-exist.
Yeah, I think those kind of things are make or break, unfortunately, for a lot of relationships. And if you're able to get through those struggles and come out the other side even stronger, that bodes super well for your relationship, because that shows you have a pattern and ability to get through those things. And
your communication style is working.
Yeah.
I really like how Dave described it as an upward spiral if, you know, it's having dips and then goes up. Like, it's trending upward, but there are waves. Basically, there are moments of maybe not crisis, but like difficulty and hardship. And once you are able to get through that, it trends up a little bit more. There's another point of difficulty. It trends up a little bit more. I think that is a really good way of describing how it worked for us and how it, I think, works for couples that are going through this. It's not just one pivotal moment or anything like that. And it's also not just, you know, it keeps climbing, it keeps going up. At times you're going to feel like you're taking
a step
two
back.
or three or four steps back, and then eventually you regain that ground.
Yeah. And I think that's how deconstruction is too, not just like with relationships. And I think that's something that is differentiates deconstruction from like conversion to religion, because you'll hear at least how people present their conversions. It's always this kind of overnight, like there was this one moment where I felt like God was speaking to me, and that moment I knew that I needed to give my life over to him. That's how it's always framed. Usually, I guess I won't say always, but usually framed. When it comes to deconstruction, it's not like that. Like, I've always struggled to like share my story of deconstruction, because there's not like one moment that I can point to where I'm like, oh, this is when I knew like I'm leaving Christianity. It's like was a gradual reevaluating my beliefs, and I think that's seems to be like where they are too.
Yeah. I'm getting from this that Dave maybe would say he's like struggled to be honest, or like he's gotten in his own way about this stuff. And again, this is speaking from my experience. Maybe it doesn't describe Dave perfectly well, but I have also been a person that struggles to be honest about what I really think about these theological and philosophical issues, because I grew up in a home where if I expressed my curiosity or diversity of thought
It's
about
almost
those things,
like taken as an offense.
yeah, it would be taken as a personal attack against, you know, the family, the community, or whoever I'm talking to, whatever. I can't say for sure that this is what Dave is experiencing, but just my hunch, informed by my own experience, is that growing up in a kind of fundamentalist, very evangelical, very conservative Christian tradition, he probably has experienced a lot of interactions where a diversity of thought, where asking difficult questions, really being honest, if he's a very curious person, was just discouraged.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I don't know everything that's going on between like Dave and Bethany, but my hunch would be that Dave is probably having to unlearn hiding the fact that he has an idea that might disagree with what the majority in the community thinks.
Yeah.
And I don't think that means that the way that he's doing it is flawed. It's kind of just like learning to not engage in a defense mechanism now that you're in a safe position. And it seems like he is in a safe place with Bethany, and so he's having to unlearn that.
Yeah.
That's fine. And it seems like Bethany also understands, which is great.
Yeah, and I think it must be a really difficult thing for him to disentangle that kind of like gut feeling that he has when he's about to approach something that in the past, that thing that he's wanting to talk about would have been taken as an offense, and he's trying to untangle that and be like, okay, I don't have to get super worried that this is going to cause some big issue with our relationship, because Bethany has shown in the past that she's willing to have these conversations.
Right.
And from what I've seen with Dave, he seems a lot like you in that if he has a question, he cannot just like bury it or just ignore it. He has to tackle it head on. He needs to get to the bottom or find the answer to his question
in like a very systematic, organized way.
Yeah, very like super analytical is kind of what I've seen from him. Although obviously I don't know him in person. This is just what I've seen through a screen. But yeah, and he seems to be someone that can also like take on hypotheticals without bringing the emotion into it a lot of the time. And a lot of people can't do that. I think the home environment that you were brought into, people could not engage in like hypothetical discussions without making it like so real life, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, one very particular example here is just, you know, I grew up being taught over and over again that if you leave Christianity, you'll obviously be an atheist because that's the only other option, I guess. Like in the fundamentalist world, that's like the only other option.
Not just an atheist, like an anti-theist.
Yeah, an anti-theist. Yeah. You will lose all capability of creating any kind of meaning. You'll be depressed. You'll want to die. Mm-hmm. That will automatically and immediately happen. And I was like, okay, I understand that you're saying that, and maybe that's true, but that doesn't have any bearing on whether or not God actually does exist. The fact that believing in God might make a person feel more comfortable has no bearing on the truth value of that claim. I would like bring that up and people would get super offended.
Yeah.
And I'm like, personally, I would actually rather know whether or not that's true than be afraid of that possibility of losing hope and meaning and purpose and things like that.
Like what the like consequences are to that hypothetical question potentially being true, or like the answer to that being true.
It was just like I just felt like, emotionally speaking, I feel like I'm in the privileged position of being able to handle that just fine. So I don't really care if you're saying that I'm going to be hopeless and blah blah blah. I want to know. When I got on the other side of that, I realized that was all a lie, meant to keep me in the faith.
That was just a thought-stopping cliche.
Yeah.
It was designed to make you not ask that question.
Right. But even though I felt that way, I still developed this kind of defense mechanism surrounding that topic of assume that the other person is horribly afraid of atheism, horribly afraid of questioning whether or not God exists, that they believe that they will be a nihilist and suicidal if they question.
Yeah.
Fast forward to several years later, I don't believe you do, or at least, you do in your questioning. And I don't want to talk about any of the atheist stuff. I don't want to do anything that would make you even reminded that I don't believe, because I didn't want to put the burden of existential terror that I assumed you would be in on you if we talked about that.
Yeah.
Eventually we got to a point where I realized that you were just not like the community and like the family that I grew up with.
Yeah.
You just were not afraid of it in the same reactive, incredibly intensely emotional way.
Yeah.
It was a question that you wanted to think about.
And I think that has to, like, why I wasn't like that had to do a little bit with how I was brought up and the home environment that I was in, because unlike your family, I think that my family could entertain like hypotheticals and didn't necessarily discourage to that degree having those types of questions. How I describe it now is that the Christianity that my family subscribed to was a lot more wishy-washy, I think. I'm trying to figure out how to explain this, and I think the best way is to say that if I had a question, the potential answers to that question wouldn't necessarily like defeat Christianity. It would, whatever conclusion you came to, like, it always came back to God.
Yeah.
Like
all roads inevitably lead to God, so why be afraid of traveling down a new road?
If you were to ask, is evolution true or not? In my family, it would be like, well, I don't know if evolution is true, but if it is true, God's behind evolution.
Yeah.
So, and like that was a lot less in your family.
Yeah.
Like in
Oh,
your
yeah.
family, if you ask the question, is evolution true? And you entertain the possibility that it is true.
Yeah.
That means that Christianity is false.
Yeah. And even entertaining that is like an exercise in blasphemy.
Yeah. In my
Yeah.
family, it was not that way. You
Yeah.
can entertain those questions, but whatever the answer is to those questions that you come to, it still leads you back to God.
So you think it got you in this mindset of, well, can I question God's existence and still be able to create meaning in my life? Yeah, I guess that's an option.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that there's pros and cons to that, because I think the way you were brought up, there's a lot more like emotion wrapped up into deconstruction that maybe I didn't experience when I was deconstructing. But the like con to the way that I was brought up is that you could more easily bury questions or ignore them, because it's like, well, whatever the answer is, like, I still believe in Christianity.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. For us, there was like a very clearly defined way out of Christianity. If this is false, if this is true, then Christianity is all a lie and you might as well get out of it.
Yeah.
You don't want to get out of it because then everything will suck. But there's a pretty clear path out.
Yeah.
And for me, I didn't take the exact path that was laid out for me. But when I found out that certain things were true and certain things were false, and we could demonstrate that pretty well, I was out. And I was just cleanly out completely.
Yeah.
And for you, I think it was like
a lot more ambiguous.
There's no defeater argument or question or fact for your version of Christianity, because your version of Christianity is nebulous to begin with.
Yeah, it's so nebulous. It's so ambiguous that it's almost impossible to reevaluate your beliefs, because you're not completely sure what your beliefs are to begin with.
Yeah, and they don't have to be anything specific.
Yeah, and they're constantly, like, the goalpost is constantly moving, so that brings you back to Christianity.
Mine was like, the goalpost is right here, come at it.
Yeah.
I think there was a de-enmeshing that happened, and the more we de-enmesh and stand on our own 2 feet and come out each other in a life from a place of solidness internally, rather than in a state of dependence on the other person and their validation, it seems like love gets deeper and hearts are easier to open, because we're not just relying on the other person, like, open my heart, please, open my heart right now. We're actually taking ownership.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I've been blown away by, is actually Bethany taking ownership over her own life and deciding how and when and to open her heart and take agency over her own. It's just, that's been so beautiful. It's extremely attractive to me, like that, solid based, integrity based living.
Yeah, Dave and I are really, really similar.
Yeah.
I feel exactly the same way. I've talked very opinionatedly about how I don't understand the whole evangelical Christian or just like trad mask thing of being like, oh, my woman needs to submit to me and listen to what I have to say
and agree with everything. We need to have the same exact opinion on everything.
Like, sorry, my like ego's not so fragile that I have to like have a kid around me all the time to be like, yes sir. You know, no, the independence, the ownership, the self agency is great. It's awesome.
It seems like this deconstruction has brought both of them into more individualness within their relationship and more knowing who they are as people. And I think I agree with Dave that when you do that, when you really know yourself more and are making sure that your needs are met, then you have more to bring to the relationship, and the deeper your love is for one another.
Yeah.
I agree with that. And I thought that it was really interesting that he was bringing up the enmeshing, that he was saying that there is a lot of de-enmeshment that's happened in their relationship, because I think we can relate to that. And I think that that's one area that we struggle in our relationship, is with enmeshment. I don't think it's ever been to the point where we're so enmeshed with one another that, we can't have our individual opinions on stuff, or we're constantly needing each other's validation. I don't think it's ever been to that point, but we do struggle a little bit with Like if one of us is upset or feeling negative emotions, it's hard for us to kind of detach ourselves from that and take a step back and not jump in to try to like save the other person or feel like we need to be feeling as bad as they are.
Yeah.
We have struggled with that in the past. I think we're
better at it now,
better,
but yeah, that's probably like that's the closest thing I think that we have to a toxic trait is like becoming the same person to the degree to where it's like we actually would be better off if we could operate as one but also operate separately if we need to, you know. And I think we're a lot better at that now, but a few years ago that was a lot harder for us. And
in a lot of ways we do operate as one, and I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. I think Christianity might be onto something a little bit when they talk about the two becoming one. You know, there's some good in that. And I think also that has to do with we're just with each other all the time. We're always around each other. But we both also have like our own identities, our own interests, our own opinions, different ways that we identify. And I think that that's important. Okay, so here I'm going to give a little bit of background information because we're going to jump ahead a bit. So Bethany here is talking about an older woman who she's been seeing for counseling. She talked about that in their part 1, and how this woman has been really encouraging of her and Dave's relationship. She's told Bethany that because of everything she's gone through with Girl Defined and how much they've been talked about online, that she's very prepared to navigate this new dynamic with Dave. And I think that that is true. Bethany has been through a lot with Girl Defined. So I think she's pretty strong. She has thick skin at this point, I'd imagine.
I think she's probably been through more than creators 10 times her reach. She's
kind of crazy.
I mean, she's like the most bullied Christian content creator on the internet as far as I can find.
There is such a thing as the Girl Defined content mill, and I think I've even contributed to that. I think maybe you can make the case that this video is contributing to the Girl Defined content mill, but there is this internet acceptance of talking about Girl Defined to an extent to which I don't think it's warranted.
Like it's an entire industry.
Exactly.
It's a genre of content.
Girl Defined, it's not about criticisms of Girl Defined anymore. Girl Defined have become like lolcows and just an easy target.
I often leave from being with her and just feel really like positive and, you know, like joyful and like, like I am equipped for this. Like I can do this. Like, and then a couple more things they've said. Like she specifically said to, you know, like squeeze every drop of joy out of every day. So like the reality is we really don't know if we have like tonight or tomorrow, you know, like not in like a morbid sense, but it's like that is the reality. And like a lot of us talk about that, but like, do we actually live that way, you know? And I think most people, wherever they stand on faith, want to live that way. And so she's just like, when I would have like a hard moment or something and we weren't meeting, but I would text her, she just always had more like tough love, like, well, you can't control things and you don't know what's going to happen. So just like basically enjoy the joy out of today as much as possible. And so that transition and like really waking up every day and really just like choosing Dave and even like choosing our kids and choosing our relationship and choosing the life we have, it's been like transformational. I'm gonna cry. Just because it's really sweet and like I know a lot of people like they don't really understand how it could be like so special and so like how much love I have for you. And like I guess it's just some people, you know, like, oh, like what's gonna happen to them? Are they gonna stay together? Or what's gonna, you know, like how could she be with someone who doesn't have the same faith? Like how can they even have a relationship? And it's just so hard to describe to people like how much I love him and how much like it's not just like a choice like where you're forcing it, you know, it's like it's just so in this bra strip. I'm gonna lose my bra. It's just so beautiful. Like it really has been. Like I felt like a different person and like my heart has been so open and I've just had more joy and more like love in my heart towards him and just towards like life in general than I think I've like ever experienced. And it's just like it's so hard to describe. And it doesn't mean there aren't ups and downs, but I definitely wouldn't rewind and go back to a different place in our relationship where we did share the same faith. It's like, even if we never share the same faith again, like the potential that we have in our relationship is just so beautiful. And like, I wouldn't, I just wouldn't trade it. So
the most de-radicalizing thing that you can possibly experience is getting to know and especially loving someone who has different ideas, beliefs, positions than you. And that's what Bethany has experienced. And I'm really glad that I understand when they stay off the internet, but I'm glad that like this exists to show some people if this was you in this situation, you know, would you react this way? I kind of hope that you would.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think that this is why we think that this collaboration between them and Zelf is so important, because like you said, the thing that is the most de-radicalizing, the thing that is the most moderating of someone's views is for them to interact regularly with someone that has a different opinion with them. That's just something that's backed up by statistics.
Yeah.
It's a fact. I think when we sustain this us versus them narrative and are like, well, we can't even talk to these people because their views are just so harmful that, you know, we can't have any interaction because interacting with them is somehow platforming their views.
Like when we're dealing in absolutes, basically.
Yeah, I think that that's not helpful.
There definitely are ways to have public conversations that don't help at all. Mm-hmm. There are also ways to have private conversations that don't help at all, although I think it's a lot easier to do it wrong publicly than privately. Yeah. But I don't think that acknowledging that and practicing that means dealing in such absolutes that there's 100% always guilt by association when somebody does this or this or this, or that you can't have any type of public conversation with someone who's in a very specific context.
Yeah.
You know?
It's a lot more context dependent than I think people want to act like it is.
Yeah.
One example of like a public conversation that I don't think should happen, and we can cut this out if you don't want to talk about this, but you were recently given an opportunity to interview Richard Dawkins, and you turned that down because, and you're going to be talking about this in one of your videos.
Yeah, hopefully.
You turn that down because right now, Richard Dawkins, the main thing that he's talking about, or one of the main things he's talking about, is
just trans issues.
Yeah. And
he's most popular as a pseudo-intellectual right now.
Yeah.
Speaking on something that he doesn't understand, something that he has no expertise on, and something that he's very highly socially motivated to speak on. And also, if he wants to get attention, he's very motivated to speak on it. And so I'm like, I'm not going to interview you about your new biology book if you are really a transphobe as a career at
right
this
now,
point.
Yeah.
And I kind of think that just giving in to that like pipeline to radicalism within atheism is an extremely irresponsible thing for me to do.
Yeah.
I don't think working with all of these like podcaster and debate and pundit bros does anything but hurt people and confuse our audience who trusts us to portray like an academic and compassionate and skeptical viewpoint when like these people are not any of those things.
Yeah. And why that conversation would not be beneficial is because Richard Dawkins is such a huge public figure. He's probably a millionaire, I'd imagine.
Oh yeah. Multi-millionaire.
Yeah. And the main thing he's on right now is like the trans stuff. That is a completely different context than sitting down with two people that have a very, very small impact on the internet. I wouldn't really call them, are they public figures? I don't know. How do we want to define what a public figure is in 2024?
They have slightly larger social media platforms than the average person.
And they're being very open about changing and reevaluating their beliefs and wanting to not believe things or put things forward that could be harming people.
Right. That's like their primary focus right now.
Yeah, that's their primary focus. So like those two contexts are so different. So I think it just goes back to it's very situational and context dependent, and we can't fall into this like black and white thinking of like we can never have conversations or be friends with people that might have opinions that don't match our own, because then we have the potential to platform them.
Yeah.
I understand the concern there for
Yeah.
sure. And I think you do need to ask yourself, is this going to be beneficial? Is this platforming bigotry? But in this situation, I don't think that it is. And I think we do, to a certain extent, need to try to meet people where they're at. If our goal is to kind of like change these narratives about religious subjects, get people to reevaluate their bigotry, then this kind of stuff is necessary. If we continue to push them into their own echo chamber because we refuse to even have a conversation with them, things are not going to get better.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just my opinion.
You have to evaluate context.
Yeah.
There's no conversation about what is right and wrong in these conversations where you're not considering the context heavily.
Yeah. Okay, so I feel like we got maybe a little bit off track. Went on a little bit of a tangent here. But so Bethany was talking about how she's obviously hearing from people in her real life that think that maybe her and Dave should separate since he's no longer a Christian. And she's saying to them, like, you don't understand how much I love Dave. Like, it's not such an easy thing for me to do to just leave him.
Yeah.
And I think that that is something that conservative Christians really get wrong, like the whole unequally yoked thing. To a certain degree, you cannot just like choose who you have feelings for or choose who you're in love with. It kind of just happens.
Yeah.
And I think that the way that conservative Christians think of it is that you can just like choose to no longer be in love with that person when they don't identify faith-wise how you identify.
Or that you naturally would not love them anymore if that happened. Or naturally wouldn't be attracted to them, or naturally wouldn't be able to get along with them, function well with them in everyday life.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it was presumed that you and I had a very dysfunctional relationship once we started to disagree, because the people who made that assumption thought that, well, I would be very chaotic and aggressive.
So everyone else
like,
must be too that goes through this. Yeah. Another thing to consider too is that they have kids together. So just separating is not going to be such an easy thing.
Yeah.
And I think that there are atheists that have this mentality as well.
Oh, yeah.
They kind of fall into this whole unequally yoked line of thinking. Because I've gotten comments before on my videos, especially when Drew and I are talking about things that we value in relationships. And we've been pretty vocal about how when it comes to romantic interests for us, we don't really care whether or not that person is a Christian or believes in a God. That's not what's important to us. And I've gotten comments from people being like, I'm an atheist and I could never date a Christian.
I could never love an idiot.
Yeah, it's just like, I don't really understand that mentality, because obviously I do want in a partner someone who has the same values that I have. And I think that your values do, to a certain extent, stem from your beliefs. But if we both value the same things and you just happen to believe in the Christian God, like, why does that matter? Like, how is that going to affect our relationship? I don't get it.
We care about the functional difference, and other people will like make decisions based, like sweeping decisions based on principle.
Yeah. And I think that you're just falling in again to like fundamentalist way of thinking.
Yeah. I've talked about this a million times, but when I was talking about for the first time online, that I am basically like a full-time atheist activist is how I put it, but also I'm in the closet in my everyday life about being an atheist, people would comment and be like, well, you should just cut off all those idiots. You should just not care about, if they would care that you're an atheist, then they're not worth having a relationship with. And I'm like, I don't think you understand how deeply this stuff goes.
Yeah, it's not that simple.
Bethany cares that Dave is not a Christian anymore. But that does not mean that her reaction is so negative that it destroys any functional relationship. Yeah. It's not that simple. And I think it's really, really regressive to demand that when people leave religion, that they just cut off anybody who would possibly react in any way but overwhelming joy and praise.
Mm-hmm.
Relationships are just not that simple. Boundaries are important, but cutting everybody off on a whim based on principle is completely ridiculous.
Yeah. And I think the people that are commenting that you should just cut off anyone who's not supportive or understanding of you being an atheist buys into the idea that people who wouldn't be supportive of you are just like bad, and they're not understanding that like those people are indoctrinated as well into that.
Yeah, they act like they're completely, like they're automatons within the religion. They couldn't possibly change their mind or become more open-minded, but also they're doing it on their own accord, and they take full responsibility for having any kind of negative like opinion. I mean, I've had responses from people when I first came out to them, like actual friends in real life, where they immediately try to convert me back. And then now like they're not religious and they're like, yeah, I'm glad you didn't listen to arguments I gave you back then.
Yeah,
so,
and they weren't just trying to convert you back because they just like are awful people and want to be malicious.
No.
They did that because they genuinely believed that that was the best thing for you.
Yeah, and I was like, I appreciate that you care, and as long as we can have the appropriate boundaries with this, I'm cool to still, have a relationship with you. And they're like, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Like, that's totally an option. Who believes in God? I don't know anyone who believes in God that's not crazy.
They're the same people that say everyone was born an atheist until someone started lying to them.
Anyone who has 3 brain cells knows that there is in fact no God. It's a delusion and mental illness to believe in fairies and unicorns and gods.
Within the last month, this has been one of the kind of biggest moments for me of realizing how to reconcile long-term commitment with choosing, because it's like a dialectic. If you commit and you say, I'm going to be with you for the rest of my life, or till death do us part, that sort of thing, which is what we did. How can I then, on a day-to-day basis, say I choose to stay? Because it's like it becomes very easily a prison. It's like I'm a slave of that promise that I made when it's a bad day. Maybe on a good day I'm like, yeah, love that commitment, and then it's like, how do I have any agency left? How am I
past me make a decision?
Yeah, 100%. And so that I've had to really work through that. And there's like a little doorway where you could do both, and that's what I found. And the more I start to talk about long-term commitment, and with Bethany, the more she starts to talk about choosing on a day-to-day basis. So in a sense, Esther Perel talks about how if you take the we person and the I person, one of the people saying, well, what do you want? Where's the I? And the other person is saying, well, where's the we? Where is the togetherness and all this? If you swap roles, often what will happen is the other person will begin to, if you're a we person and you start to speak in the I terms, the other person may start to speak in the we terms. And that's what I've started to find, is that the more I speak in terms of long-term commitment, the more she talks about the choosing now. And the more I was speaking in terms of choosing now, she was thinking about, well, what about the long-term commitment? So it's like it's a really interesting dynamic. Yeah. But my big question was, can I grow and be committed? Or do I have to think of life as more open? Like, you need to have your options open so that you can grow. And growing is the number one thing. And I got to the point of like, can I actually continue to make long-term commitment and trust that I will not stop growing, and that this is actually a means, or the way. This is the way that I can never stop growing in this relationship. And that's what I believe. And that's a leap of faith. That's a leap of faith. I am looking towards the future and saying, this is what I choose. And I've told Bethany this. And then on a regular basis, there are a bunch of choices I can make and a bunch of choices she can make, because a lot of people who get married, they don't choose each other on a regular basis. They chose each other back then, and now they just have to stay married. And it's hell, because because the choice on a regular basis is not there. So I want both.
Yeah.
I want Bethany to be secure that I'm not going anywhere, and I want me to have the agency to be able to choose her every day. So that's like magic, you know, be able to figure that out.
It's a weird one with marriage because you've committed to be together forever, but technically you are free to leave any day.
Oh, yeah.
So you do get to choose each other.
But I can't leave without breaking a promise. So that's the one trade-off.
And we know Dave's
One
word.
thing about Dave, he's an integrity man.
Aspiring. But
Integrity defined over here this week.
that changed my mind. That challenged me. It really challenged me. Like, yes, I can leave, but I can't leave and keep a promise. So either I keep a promise or I leave. I can't have both. So ultimately, in no case do I have complete freedom. It's impossible.
This is getting we were going to touch on some really philosophical points here.
It's impossible. Yeah.
Love and freedom.
Yeah.
And all
No,
that.
if I think, to be free, I need to be able to leave. Well, that's to say, if I leave, I'm not free to keep my promise anymore.
So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
I understand what he's saying, but I don't think that I ever conceptualized marriage the same way that he does. I mean, I always thought about it as I'm making this commitment to you, but you and I both know that there are provisions here. Like we understand that if the situation gets to where it's toxic for either one of us, to where it's really harmful for either one of us, we're out. But I mean, the way that I saw the commitment that I made, and I mean, you can speak to this too, was really, I promise to show love as an action. I'm going to always actively work toward making our relationship what it needs to be for both of us. And so it was a commitment to continually love you in the way that I was, like, I suppose, emotionally driven to do so at the time when we, like, got together. I'm going to keep up this effort. It was like that's my commitment. Not like we're just going to be technically married. You know? That's not how I thought about it.
And leaving room for the potential that the most loving action could mean you leaving.
Yes, yeah.
If that would be... I don't know if we would have, or you would have, like, phrased it that way back when we were Christians, because when we got married, we both were Christians.
Yeah.
But I think that we, on some level, did kind of accept that there could be a potentiality that we need to separate if it's just toxic for both of us.
Yeah.
When I first watched this, I kind of did think that Dave was philosophizing a little bit here. It felt like a little bit too, like, hypothetical or theoretical way of thinking about his relationship with Bethany. And I think both you and I are a lot more intuitive in the way that we think about, like, relationships.
Yeah.
But to Dave, I think it's really important that he, like, reconciles these different things within him and
has a systematic framework that's consistent at all times.
Like, he kind of needs to fit it into, like, a syllogism a little bit, which I can understand, but I think that there might be some drawbacks to looking at relationships that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was like, I feel like you're kind of philosophizing a little bit too much about this. But the more I thought about it, I was like, I do kind of understand where he's coming from, because when he and Bethany got married, the promise that he did make was that he was committed till death do us part. And leaving a marriage in Christianity is almost like a transgression.
Yeah.
Like, you really have to have a good reason to get a divorce.
Yeah. There's more against divorce in the New Testament than there is about, like, women not being in charge or homosexuality or abortion or any of the hot topic issues we talk about today.
Yeah. And so I think for him, he's like, okay, how do I reframe our marriage and the promise that I made and what our relationship is now that I don't have Christianity to kind of ground it? How do I, like, keep this promise while also having some sort of agency in that. So I think that's like the things that he's trying to reconcile. If I'm understanding correctly, I think he's reconciled it by saying, my intention is to stay with you till death do us part. And every single day I am actively choosing that.
Yeah.
But technically I do have the option to not choose that if that's what's best for both of us.
Yeah.
I feel like that's what he's saying here.
Like,
correct me if I'm wrong.
Kind of comes down to the same effect as the way that I think about it. But
Yeah.
I think the way that I think about it is just starts from a different premise from the beginning. I'm not stuck to the premises that he's using.
Yeah.
I listened to this one book that was talking about variety of experience, breadth of experience versus depth of experience. And this guy had a lot of breadth of experience. He traveled all over the place. He slept with a lot of different people. He had a lot of different experiences. And now later in life, in his 30s or whatever, he's traded the breadth of experience for, things that he probably wouldn't have thought before. This is just what I want, marriage, like living in a specific location, committing to live in, a city, and not move around all the time. And he's saying that there's this depth of experience that actually is impossible to experience when breadth is the goal. I just don't want to be tied down. Once you get tied down, there is, for better or worse, something that cannot be experienced when the focus is on breadth.
I have been in the place that Dave sounded like he was entertaining for a bit. That breadth of experience is really what I need. I've been so confined, all this kind of stuff. And like, to a certain degree, some breadth of experience, I think, for me was very important to gain. However, since I was a kid, I have always been into Epicurean and transcendental philosophies. And they really focus on simple, regular, everyday experience and like really getting as much joy and contentment and fulfillment out of those everyday common experiences as you possibly can, and that as a path to ultimate fulfillment and happiness. I think that there's even, I've believed that since I was probably 14 or 15 years old, but I do still continually, with my own experience with studying the way that psychology works, the way that relationships work, the way that people like do their lifestyles, I think that science even kind of backs up that like this is true. Living deeply, I think, is usually more productive in creating a happy and fulfilled life than having breadth of experience. For me, gaining breadth of experience was actually important so that I could realize how much more it sucks as compared to depth of experience.
Yeah.
It just allowed me to understand the context of how important depth of our life together really is and always has been and always will be.
Yeah, that's why I really wanted us to respond to this portion, because we've talked a lot about this and we have very strong opinions on like breadth versus depth of experience. And I think that we see a lot of people come out of Christianity, people deconvert, and their focus is solely on breadth of experience. They think that I've been so restricted from all of these experiences, now I need to go out and do everything. And I think that you should do some of it. I think that that's positive. Yeah. But also realizing that the majority of your life, what you're going to be engaging in is pretty mundane. And it's going to be you're going to find a lot more joy if you cultivate meaning and some of the more mundane things in life, rather than focusing so much on like, I have to have all these experiences in order to give my life meaning. Yeah.
Like, I think that there's this idea, I'm gonna use a specific example here. There's this idea in our generation, I think in millennials specifically, that like being a digital nomad is peak living, traveling as much as you can, meeting as many people as you can, sleeping with as many people as you can, having a million different jobs, going to a million different places, and never ever being tied down in any way, always moving. That is, you can collect all the experiences. And like, we've traveled a lot. We have collected a lot of experiences. And yeah, it's like important to us. But when you study the relationships and the psychology of people like digital nomads, they're typically not actually that happy. They typically don't really like their jobs. They typically don't really like where they're living.
Yeah.
They typically don't have very many friends. They don't have very close connection to their family.
Yeah.
Their life,
they don't have any roots, really.
Yeah. By all accounts, their lives, when they've done it for a long time, not just a brief period, they're a lot of time just not as good.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that breadth of experience is great, if only to figure out how meaningful your life can be without that.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that it's somewhat of a balancing act. I think it's focusing on depth of experience and cultivating meaning in these, your everyday mundane life, and then breaking that up here and there with some breadth of experience. Go travel a couple times a year, go to a concert, doing those kinds of things are good, but like every night going to a concert, every night trying to hook up with somebody new, I just don't think that that's going to lead to happiness. I think that, like you said, I think that's like backed up in the data, and just like people that I've talked to that do focus a lot on that in their lives tend to not seem that happy. So.
Yeah, it doesn't work out in the long run, unfortunately.
Yeah.
How are you two doing in terms of, do you have to avoid specific conversations, or have you sort of figured out a system for how to like navigate, because before you mentioned how there were certain topics you would avoid, and it sounds like now you're both able to sort of bring each of your truths to the table and have it be allowed. But on a daily basis, are there things that work for you in terms of not overly triggering each other, or just kind of curious?
I don't want to bring unnecessary suffering into Bethany's life. So she's able to express things, and I can just like turn the dials a little bit, the adjustments. Okay, I'll try not to say that. I'll try not to do that. And that's just like my way of, of respecting her, is that too vague?
Well, I mean, I guess in any relationship, you don't have to say every single thing that pops into your head. It's going to be like kind of a roller coaster. Like, so I think there's a way, like any relationship, you just have to have like some common sense,
Don't be an idiot.
Yeah,
change my life.
That's kind of it. So I think in that way, we're like learning, I think like, being close and in Christian terms, like being one doesn't mean you have to share every single thing. Like that might like destroy some like intimacy in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Like you don't have to be everything to each other, so that's been super helpful, just like knowing that more. But also, I mean, I feel like we have more honesty and more ability to share truthfully how we feel and what we think. I mean, there's no, like when it comes to like faith stuff, we'll talk about like anything. Like it's not a like sore subject at all, like we're both curious and what each other are learning, and it's always fascinating. I'm super fascinated with what he's learning, and
I'm super fascinated with her Christian faith.
So this is why you asked me that question
Yeah.
the other day. She's like, is there anything that we don't talk about or like wouldn't cross into talking about because we wouldn't want to like make it hard on the other person?
Yeah.
We like sat there trying to think of things, and I'm like, I think I answered like, I mean, when at a certain time when like I was an atheist and you were not, like I tried not to talk about the meaning thing.
Yeah.
Because I thought that would be difficult, but I literally can't think of anything.
Yeah. I was kind of fascinated by this discussion here, and it got me thinking, are there like certain topics that we'll avoid bringing up with one another? And I think at this point in our relationship, there really isn't any topic that's off of the table.
Like I feel weird that I can't think of anything. But
yeah,
I just genuinely
there really
can't.
isn't. I mean, I think that there are topics that we're both careful on how we approach the conversation.
Yeah.
Because both of us or one of us might have some trauma associated with certain conversations.
Just be sensitive on the topic or
so
something.
we might only bring up that topic at a certain time, or we're very careful. We use specific words when we're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, at this point, there's not any like topics that are off limits.
Right.
But I was thinking back to like when we first got married, and even before that when we were dating, were there things that we like, topics that we would not bring up? And like, for sure.
Oh yeah.
Like there were,
especially stuff about sex.
Yeah, a lot of sex, like masturbation, just like sexual topics that we were taught that, you know, aren't God honoring, I guess.
And it's like,
we wouldn't bring up.
We were taught like, oh, you know, like you can talk about and do whatever you want when you're married, but you
can't just flip a switch.
Yeah, you can't just be like suddenly like, hey, so we both masturbate, right? You cannot do that. It feels so wrong to do that.
Well, and I think, I don't know how you thought of it, but I still kind of thought that you weren't supposed to masturbate even if you were married. And even if the other person knew that you were doing that.
Yeah.
I didn't think you were supposed to.
Right.
So, yeah. But bringing this back to Bethany and Dave, I think that where they are right now and the kind of like the new revelations in their relationship, there might be some topics that aren't on the table yet for them. I'm just putting that myself in their shoes and where we were at that time. I'm sure that there's going to be a lot more things that come up over the next few years for them, topics that they're going to have to tackle. I don't know if it's going to be like sexual stuff for them, but I'm sure that that's going to happen. And I think they've already shown that they have an ability to talk about these like scary things and get through it together. So
yeah, they have a good communication style. So like that hypotheticals, like, yeah, probably would work out.
Yeah.
Thinking of our faith and our conversations around stuff like that, I think because we're both really curious and less, for me especially, afraid of ideas that are different. I think for me, I've been afraid of like, oh, like, no, you can't read about that or learn that because then you'll just like lose everything, you know? And it's like, oh no, I'm like, wow, am I really that like fragile, you know? Like, oh, I can think and be thoughtful and read stuff and listen to stuff. And it's okay to be challenged, because if something's challenging you and you're like, wait, that might not be true, like, well, that's probably a good thing, you know? And so getting rid of the fear and stepping into these conversations more. And, you know, sometimes he sends me stuff and I'm like, I don't know what these people are talking about. Send me the basic one version, you know? But it's actually been really, really interesting. And, you know, I'm listening to books that you probably listened to like 3 years ago, or, you know, audiobooks or whatever, but it's really helpful. And some stuff I'm like, how have I never really thought about that? You know, like, how have I just never really dug into some of this and just kind of always had one perspective? And he brings stuff up and I'm like, that's actually a really good question. And I don't have to be afraid of it, because it's like, I believe the truth is out there. And so it's like, I don't have to be afraid of, you know, finding the truth, because I think there's like one truth in a lot of these areas. And so it's just very freeing to not live in fear and to not be afraid. And I think in our relationship that helps a lot, because it's like, we could just be curious and it's not a threat.
I love that.
I really related a lot to when Bethany was saying like, how did I not think of this? How did I never like dig into these subjects? Because I think back to when I was a Christian, and there's some things it never entered my mind to be like, hey, is that true? I should probably look into that. Like some things just never entered my mind to do that. And I think part of that had to do with like the way I was brought up and like the wishy-washy Christianity, where, you know, the goalpost was constantly moving.
Yeah.
It's just like, it didn't matter. There wasn't a point in me digging into certain things, because like
you'd always find the same answer every time.
But the thing that scares me is realizing that there are views that I hold now that for some reason it's not coming to my mind to reevaluate them, when maybe it's so obvious that I need to reevaluate it, or like the answer is like right there, and for some reason I'm just not looking into it, you know?
Yeah. I think the way to mitigate that is found in something very revealing that Bethany said. She realizes that there are all these things she's never questioned before, because now asking those questions, exploring that, is not a threat.
Yeah.
It's not presented as a threat by Dave. If she does ask a question and come out on a different side of things, then it doesn't threaten her relationship with Dave. If she looks at it and thinks the same thing, it doesn't threaten her relationship with Dave. Like, she has security and safety and love that's guaranteed, regardless of where she ends up. which is not what fundamentalist Christianity promises.
Right.
I mean, they're like, oh yeah, God like loves us unconditionally, but he'll also burn you forever if you think this. Even just think it.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that's not really conditional. That's not really unconditional love. That's very conditional. So I think that if we want to help fundamentalists get outside of the trap or the process or the prison that they've been programmed to carry with them all the time, where they can't question something because it's a threat, like we have to take away the threat.
Yeah.
You know, and that looks different for everybody. You can't take away the threat for everyone. You can't just shower someone with love and affection that the person really sucks. Like it's not really going to help. It's not going to help them, not going to help you. But in one-on-one like friendships, especially in romantic and committed relationships, just showing the other person that they have security regardless.
Yeah. Like kind of
that will take the threat away.
Like creating a space for them where it's safe to question things.
Yeah.
And also like unshaming the idea that you have to have solid answers to your questions. Because I think as a fundamentalist, you're taught that you have to have these solid answers. And if you don't, that's a problem. And I think that there is a lot of value in saying, you know what, I don't know. And I'm not sure if there are answers to these questions. Maybe it just really isn't knowable. And having like kind of contentment or peace with that.
Yeah. I would say to you, don't worry too much about or at least don't, fixate too much on what if there are things now, or there almost certainly are things now that I am just not evaluating for some reason. Because if you do evaluate those things, if you do like stumble across a question you've never asked yourself, like I'm still here and I still love you and still want to be with you. We've established that. So yeah, have at it. Like you're going to be fine if you do find one of those things.
Well, and I think that the way for me to realize like, oh, hey, I need to reevaluate this thing is just having community or having people around me that do think differently.
Yeah.
Like I think that's like we've talked about. That's like the most moderating thing. It's the thing that's going to kind of spark that idea and you're like, oh, hey, I've never heard that before. Like maybe I need to consider your position on that. Yeah.
Having very, very secure relationships, but also having a diversity of relationships and perspectives and viewpoints at the same time. It's a difficult balance to strike, and a lot of people aren't lucky enough to just like have the privilege to have that. And it's nice that Bethany and Dave seem to be finding that, and I feel like we've found that. So I think we're fortunate in that way. Yeah,
and I think I should also clarify, I'm not saying that like people need to be friends with people that like think being gay is wrong or something.
Yeah, you don't have
like,
to do that.
Yeah, like you don't have to put up with people that are like very bigoted against you.
No.
But having people in your life that might come from a different faith background or just are in a different situation or place in life, that's usually helpful.
Yeah.
There is this idea around deconstruction that I think I have for sure. Like, oh, if you want to, like, if you deconstruct, it's just because, like, you just want to do whatever you want to do and you're not really thinking about things. And I think there are some people like that. Like, I'm just done with Christianity.
I'm a little like that.
That's your right, Dave.
It's my right. It's my birthright to do whatever the hell I want.
Yeah.
But seeing, like, how much, like, he's not just, like, being, like, he's very thoughtful about all of this. And he's very, like, studying and reading a ton, and so I respect that a lot. And
meeting with pastors, I'm like, bring me all the best pastors. I've met with quite a few people at this point. I love it.
I think a lot of our audience relate to that.
Love it. It's so cool. Before it was like a different perspective. It's like, oh, I wouldn't really want to talk to someone like that. It's like, because they might know something I don't. And now it's kind of like, bring me the perspectives.
Yeah, you're hungry.
Let's sit down. Yeah.
Well, and like, it's interesting because, like, from the Christian perspective, at least, like, people that I've talked to, there's almost like, well, there is a sense of like grieving or mourning or whatever, the life you thought you were gonna have or whatever. But there's also, it's been strange for me. People almost like grieving like my life is like this, like it's the end, you know, or like even as a Christian, them like grieving like, oh, Dave is done. Like there's just, this is it, you know? But I'm like, as a Christian, if you really believe that the Bible is true, if you really believe that Jesus is who he says he is, like, wouldn't he have the power to bring someone back to himself if that's the truth? And so for me, it's like, I don't have to worry about this stuff. You know, I do believe it's true. And as I study and stuff, it's like, well, if Jesus is who he says he is, like, I don't have to be like convincing him. It's like, it would be like Jesus who brought him back to him.
But yeah, I mean, I agree so much with Bethany. Like, if Christianity is true, why should somebody having questions, having doubts, why would that be a threat? Why would you perceive that as a threat? If you really believe it's true, then it should stand on its own, you know?
Yeah.
I'm kind of reminded of the Deconstruction of Christianity book that Alyssa Childers and Tim Barnett just came out with. We did a response video of an interview that they did about the book with Sean McDowell. And it's just like the whole thing is like they're really perceiving the deconstruction movement as a threat, and that we're after your children and we're going to convince your children to leave Christianity and become godless atheists who just like sin all the time.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, if you really are so sure that Christianity is true, why are you worried?
Yeah.
Like, you shouldn't be worried about it.
God is all powerful, but he needs your money. Like that kind of vibe. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we're pretty much at the end. There is quite a bit more. There's like 20 more minutes in their interview, but they're mostly talking about their kids and how they're navigating their marriage, like their interfaith marriage with kids. And we don't have children, so that's something that we obviously don't have any input on.
Yeah.
And shouldn't really speak on. So we're just gonna skip the rest of this, but I don't know, what were your final thoughts on all of this?
We definitely can relate with them quite a bit. I am just glad that they have found so much safety with each other, because what they're both going through is a very difficult thing from both of their differing perspectives. Both of them having, you know, like family and people on the internet all coming at them from different directions. I'm just really glad that they have each other and kind of in the same way that we had each other. I think that the future looks good for them because it looked good for us.
I should mention that at the very end of this video, Zelf includes this screenshot of a message that they received from Dave, basically saying that him and Bethany are completely stepping away from social media. You can't even find Bethany Beal's like Instagram anymore. It's like deactivated.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And they're saying like, hey, we're stepping away from social media, so we're not going to be active in our group chat anymore. And I honestly think that that's a good decision for them right now, because they're going through a lot and they're obviously getting a lot of opinions in their real life over what's happening.
Yeah.
They don't need to be dealing with the internet as well. I think that that is a very good thing for them to be kind of stepping back. And I'm hopeful for them and I wish them best of luck with, focusing on their relationship. Yeah.
Selfishly, I kind of hope that they do come back in some respect, just because I feel like I'd get along with Dave. I kind of just want to talk to him. So maybe one day I'll be able to talk to Dave. That would be cool.
Yeah, that would be cool. Real quick, guys, don't forget to check out Womanizer and use my code ANTIBOT20 to receive 20% off their entire site. Thank you so much for watching, and a huge thank you to my patrons who help make these videos possible. If you like this video, please be sure to subscribe and ring the bell. If you'd like to follow me on social media, my Instagram is Taylor. My Instagram is Taylor_the_antibot. And if you'd like to consider supporting this channel financially, a link to my Patreon will be down in the description. And we'll see you on the next one. Say bye.